Welcome back to the Ironbird Podcast. Today's guest is Ryan Rudolph. He's a senior manager at Bark Air, the first private aviation experience built entirely around dog travel. In this episode, we dig into how Bark Air is creating a new category in luxury travel, what goes into planning and operating flights for four-legged passengers, and how they're navigating regulation, partnerships, and demand in a rapidly evolving market. If you're curious about innovation in private aviation, from logistics to customer experience, this is one you don't want to miss. Thank you. We'll just kind of jump right into it, Ryan. Want to give us some brief context about, what Bark Inc. is and how Bark Air was kind of created?
Yeah, Bark Inc., and thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Bark Inc. was started in 2011. Mm-hmm. Three co-founders, Matt, Carly, and Henrik. Originally, there's a great podcast to talk about, which is How I Built This. Guy Ross talks about the whole podcast.
Great podcast.
But they started a toy subscription business for dogs, with the main thought being dogs are our core business. That's everything we do. We think about dogs in this way. How can we serve them? So that started in 2011, went public in 2021. And over the years, Matt, our co-founder, he's now our co-founder and CEO, had a Great Dane. So large dog. His passion was traveling.
With, right?
Yeah, really hard to travel with. So was never able to go anywhere on an aircraft with him. Maybe he'd drive some places. So went to some states with him. His dog unfortunately passed a couple of years ago, but just kind of inspired that idea of how can we travel with our dogs? What does that look like? And obviously commercial airlines have some pretty hard restrictions to do that.
I mean, it's only gotten worse, right?
Yeah. Expensive.
Yeah.
If you want to talk even more expensive, there's cargo, right? And the other issue with cargo is putting your dog in that kind of enclosed environment. It's dark. One of our launch videos actually is Matt, our founder, went in a cargo
that was a great
hold
video.
and did the whole flight and
they're not usually temperature controlled either,
not temperature
right?
controlled, very loud. Yeah. So I mean, we've heard horror stories of, hey, dog came in one way and came out the other, and it was a completely different dog. And we've actually had the fortune to fly some of those dogs after having done that and hear about, hey, this was the smoothest experience. My dog, had a great time. But going back to that, started in April of 2024, really with our launch of Bark Air. So we're a Part 380 operator. Happy to talk through what that means. But looked at, okay, this is our launch. We're going to go with a couple cities to start, and really using those charter aircraft as our carrier to, move dogs and people. So with each seat that you're buying, you're getting either 2 dogs under a certain threshold. So 50 pounds, you can bring 2 dogs.
Total, 50 pounds total.
50, no, as long as they're under.
Each dog under 50. Yeah.
And then otherwise, it's a much larger dog, right? So most of our customers are bringing their Great Dane, their Golden Retriever.
Yeah.
That's, anywhere from, we've flown 150-pound dogs to, usually the average is around 70.
This episode is brought to you by Charter Flight Support, the only coverage in private aviation that protects you when an aircraft mechanical issue stops your aircraft from flying. CFS not only provides financial support if the replacement aircraft costs more, they also help locate and book quality backup aircraft fast. Learn more at charterflightsupport.com, and don't forget to sign up for their newsletter, The Fix, for real-time insights on private jet trends, aircraft types, and rates. This episode is brought to you by Video Valet. If you care about having the best in-flight experience on your private flights, Video Valet offers up to 1.2 million movies, shows, magazines, and newspapers, all available on board without the need of expensive Wi-Fi or hardware. Eric and his team at Video Valet deliver fully customized iPads to ensure that your preferences are met on every single flight. Whether providing my kids with their favorite shows or allowing me and my wife to catch up on breaking news, I personally could never travel without it again. Video Valet is offering a special promotion to Ironbird Podcast listeners. Mention Ironbird, and Video Valet will add 1 free fully personalized iPad at no additional cost. Now to the Ironbird Podcast. Wow. How did you, when you started, maybe tell me this first. How did you get involved in the company, and what was the initial idea of, all right, we're going to bring Ryan in, and this is the expertise he's going to provide, and how's your role kind of change in that?
So I'll start with private aviation. When I started, just graduated school, was looking at different jobs, and eventually started as the first employee at a company called Fly Louie. So we were actually a 380 model as well, doing New York to Nantucket. Did that for a couple years, pivoted the model to really help group purchasing for the smaller independent Part 135 operator. So I was at Fly Louie for 5 years, and then eventually was like, okay, I'm ready for a new challenge.
Yep.
Started doing a lot of consulting. So worked with a maintenance software called Wingwork, kind of did a bunch of different engagements. And actually, funny enough, cold emailed our CEO and said, hey, I saw you're launching this airline for dogs. Like, sounds awesome. I love dogs. Would love to get involved. It was a couple months before I heard back, but it's always something to just cold CEO outreach and get there. But eventually got brought on to do an RFP process, looking at, hey, this is where our pricing is today. We'd love to explore other options. How can we, drive down some of the cogs of our operation? So started there, 3-month consulting project. Obviously went well and kind of got brought on to say, hey, this is what your role is now. And the future role is going to be, how can we look at pricing, new routes? And really what I'm overseeing is just the day-to-day operation. So overseeing every flight that takes off. If we have mechanical issues, how can we recover those? And just helping our team. No one had aviation background. Our chief supply chain officer, James, he's the co-founder of Bark Air. He's busy dealing with 2 million dog subscribers on a monthly basis and then working through everything there. So he helped get that business to kind of step one and then passed it on to the great team we have today. So it's Mike Novotny, who's our former COO of the business, Bark Inc., got brought on to really oversee Bark Air.
Wow.
We have Catherine, who's our former chief of staff, overseeing kind of the day-to-day flight experience. And then Hernan, who's our SVP of kind of what we call our happy team. So that's the great part about Bark Air is we have all of these infrastructure layers. So have a whole team that's dedicated to the inbound communication with the passengers. So working through that, we'll talk more about what that pre-flight experience looks like, all of that. And then I think our biggest differentiator is our concierge service. So happy to talk through that now or later in the podcast.
Well, it's just interesting that they're taking serious executives from a public company and bringing them into this project. So they're obviously very serious about it. If that's the kind of people that they have kind of on the team.
In a short, since April, we've done over about 125 flights. And then we've also served over 1,000 dogs so far.
Wow.
The number of people is actually a little less because of that 2-dog scenario I talked through. So yeah, it's a serious business, right? Like if you look at our executive statements and public, filings that we have to do, like Bark Air is listed on there, right? So we are under that public company, and it's great to be that and have that infrastructure to really grow. And they're all very passionate about this business, and it goes back to that idea of how can we serve dogs and do that. And Bark Air was the first airline that's meant for serving dogs first and humans second.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Now, be that you're under a public company, does that change anything of how you're operating the business? I assume you have to do a little bit more things by the book.
Sure.
That,
Yeah, everything's obviously by the book, but I think the other thing to think about is just like our customer perception at the end of the day, right? Yeah. We're a big company. A lot of our customers that are flying might also be BarkBox subscribers. Yeah. So making sure that experience through and through is matched and that, we're able to serve them. And then certainly like the financial side, right? Like making sure we run a very good operation that's profitable and everything else that follows with that. So
which is not being profitable in aviation is not an easy thing, and there's probably plenty of people that aren't that profitable. Yeah. When you first joined, what were some of the early challenges that they were having as a company? And what were some of the things that when you looked at it, you say, all right, I really think I can add some value and improve these types of things in the business?
I think a lot of it was just bringing the team up to the speed of like private aviation, right? Everyone's used to flying commercial, but didn't have that experience. So that was one thing. And then I think there's operational things with our operator. Like if you look at it, we're essentially running an airline, right? So planning on their side, like there's a clear line of we don't have operational control of the aircraft. They're handling maintenance, crew, all of that. So how can they plan around that? And I think, speaking out loud here, a lot of operators do like that scheduled flight model, right? They know the schedule 6 months in advance. Yeah. They can plan maintenance days around it. They can plan crew swaps, all of that. It's point to point. They know it's not going to be a floating like, hey, the plane's going to end in Aspen and
who knows
pick it
where
up
it's
from
going to
there.
go? Who knows what's going to happen next day?
These are the set destinations, which I don't think I mentioned, but New York, LA. So that's one flight. Starting in July, we'll actually be doing that on a weekly basis.
How often are you doing it now?
Bi-weekly.
Okay.
And then starting in July, currently we're flying to London, Madrid, Lisbon, and Paris are the 4 cities internationally. And those right now are usually bi-weekly, but starting in July, we'll be rotating through those cities. So there's always one flight internationally on any given week and one flight domestically.
What's it like logistically when you're looking at domestic flights versus the international ones? Like how much more work is one or the other, or
different
and I think challenges?
One of the biggest challenges is what we call stacking flights. So obviously people aren't just coming from Los Angeles to get to New York. We have customers coming from Seattle, maybe from Northern California. So one of the things we look at is actually arranging charters and doing that cost effectively, where it's saying, hey, we can get you from Napa down to LA on a Phenom 100 or a light jet, maybe a turboprop for a pretty good price. Then you get on our flight from LA to New York. And if you were to do that directly, you're looking at paying X and you're paying a fraction of that by going through us. So that's always a challenge, just looking at, hey, mechanicals, weather, anything that can delay that passenger getting to our one flight and then going over. Recoveries, right? That's been a challenge just because not every operator wants to fly this many dogs or understand what comes with that. So it's been an education process to say, hey, with all these things we have, whether it's our concierge, our safety practices, all of the dogs are harnessed during turbulence, takeoff, landing. It's actually strapped down to the seat. So we've developed a process there. So everyone feels safe about the dogs and comfort as well. And, a lot of times what we hear from operators is, it's, whether I'm flying 1 dogs or 9 dogs, it hasn't actually been that different because you guys are bringing that elevated experience with your own team on board, monitoring the dogs. So there's a whole process that goes into each one of these flights that we can talk about. But logistically, that's been something just to look at of how can we recover? What's that time look like? But yeah, at the end of the day, we're operating an airline, and that's been a really fun thing, I think, not only for us, but our operator partners, because they really enjoy it. And the crews love it as well, right? I was just on a flight yesterday, and crew came back, petted a lot of the dogs. Really? I mean, they love it, right? I'm sure there's some people at the operations that maybe aren't the biggest dog folks, so I would assume, opt out of those flights. I haven't actually talked to them about that, but 99% of the time, the crew loves the dogs. The flight attendants love the dogs. They're telling me about, their own stories. Even the pilot yesterday had a rescue in South Carolina.
Oh, wow.
And him and his wife had, rescued a bunch of dogs. So I think at the end of the day, what we've learned is the dog community is just fantastic and amazing. And it really shows through in our flights and also our core business of Bark Inc. and just here to serve dogs. And there's a real business there.
When you're looking at routes, early on, were you looking? Was there a data points you were looking at?
Sure.
Was it customer driven? How did you guys start to figure out what routes work, and then how are you looking forward to say, all right, here's some of the other routes that are going to make sense for us?
So I think it was really our team before I even got there. I can't take credit. Really widowed down. Hey, we're going to focus on just these routes right now: New York to LA, New York to London. Great. Let's own those. Let's really get good at them. We have good customer demand there. Well, we've looked at from expansion, and that's when we launched. I mean, we have something on our website where you can say, hey, I'm looking to fly from this place to this place. This isn't one-off charter, but more of our scheduled flights, what that looks like. I'm looking to go from these 2 places. This is the frequency I'm looking. I think we have over 100,000 data points that people just wrote in. I mean, the initial launch, so when they launched, there was over, I think, 600 to 800 news stories about that. New York Times, everyone was writing about it. And even post-launch, we've seen a bunch of media. But going back to that data point, we're always evaluating that. And then I think what I've helped do is also layer in, whether it's Doug Golan's articles, WingX, all of that other data of, hey, where are those private plane movements? What are those top origin destinations? How are we serving that? So I think we're starting a couple flights in May. We're doing New York to San Francisco, flying into Oakland. And that's another route where some of that was, hey, there's strong data points here, but also customer anecdotal. Hey, I actually was driving down or flying down from the Bay Area down to LA to make your flight. There's 3 of us on the plane that did that. you guys should put on more routes there.
You can start slow, right?
Start slow, yeah, and bi-weekly.
Yeah.
I think with the international, what we're seeing now is obviously with everything going on with tariffs, everything else, there's a lot of demand going over to Europe. Like we're sold out, I think, until October, November.
Wow.
Like no seats going to Europe.
How far in advance do you have scheduled service through? Well,
usually we're trying to look at like.
Is it not? Can we call it? We can't call it scheduled service because technically it's not.
It's not.
Right?
Yeah, we're selling space by the seats on demand.
Still on
is
demand.
the right kind of terminology.
Yeah.
But our flights usually we're looking at anywhere from 6 to 8 months in advance. But that just varies, right? Sometimes what we're looking at is, hey, this flight sold out. Like, let's put on another flight. Yeah. So going back to your operational question, like we might have a flight from, Thursday to Friday and then another flight Friday to Saturday. And like just a lot of flight stacking there and also trial and error, right? Looking at our New York to London flight leaves at like 8 a.m. Our New York to Paris flight actually leaves at 9 p.m. Mm-hmm. So like we're always looking at measuring, hey, is the red eye better for dogs, right? Yeah. They're more relaxed at night. Or, hey, is the early morning flight actually good because they are like more awake and kind of adapt. So always adapting, looking at the model. How can we tweak things? What makes sense for our customers and open to feedback there.
What's it look like from a customer standpoint? Customer has a dog, how are they booking and what's that process like after they book? Walk us through kind of from a customer standpoint. What's that look like before I step foot on an airplane?
So a couple ways to book. Obviously, our website's the easiest. Our customer service team's amazing. So whether you're calling in, emailing, they'll take you through that process, answer questions. Once you've booked, so let's say, Dan, you're flying in, 3 weeks from now. You'll get confirmation email, talk through what airports we're flying from, all of that. The next step is actually to get on a phone call with one of our team members. And that whole process is where I think we differentiate a lot in terms of our experience and understanding the dog. And the whole point of that phone call is, tell us more about your dog. What's their temperament? Yeah. How do they react with other dogs? How old are they? Are they neutered? Like every question you could think of, we're asking to try to better understand. And then I'll talk through what that data actually goes into. But there's an onboarding there. Obviously, there's a human component. What catering do you want? We have a set menu. Okay, great. I'll take this, pesto dish or whatever.
Is catering included in the...
Catering's included in the pricing. Yeah. Wow. So all in.
I have a pretty clear disdain for aviation catering. So
luckily, Catherine on our team's done like a great job of just, I think it goes back to like having a set schedule, knowing a little more of volume, but it's like, hey, on these dates, we're going to do a minimum of, 9 catering order, whatever it might be. So that's gone well. But so it takes you through the phone call. We call that the intake call, just understanding more. 24 hours before, we're confirming more information with you. Hey, where's your end destination? Is it you're going to take an Uber? We also arrange car service, have hotel recommendations. So I think that goes back to the bigger ethos of Bark. Like we want to serve your dog, right? Yeah. So it's not just the flight, it's the hotel after. We have car service providers. All of that is kind of what we're trying to help package and help you have as smooth of an experience as possible.
Do you have catering for the dogs?
I'll get there. So day of the flight, you show up. Usually, obviously, private aviation saying 15 minutes before. We actually say 45. And the reason there is this is where our concierge come in. So these are all trained dog experts. Some might own animal shelters. Some might also be vet techs. So a mix of folks all across the board, but like our dog experts. So once you show up 45 minutes before, they're evaluating, hey, did Dan's dog, is it reactive? Is it how does it behave with other dogs? And then that goes into our seating chart. So looking at, okay, I want to sit this dog here based off of what I know with the other dogs. So there's a lot that goes in the behind the scenes of making sure that goes smooth.
My dog's not great with big dogs. So like,
you have to keep on the other side.
Yeah, with the small dogs. Yeah.
So from there, show up, we have set baggage allowances. We kind of try to minimize that so you don't have any surprises. Yep. But surprises do happen and, you adapt from there. And show up 45 minutes before, meet the pilots. They do, similar to a charter check.
Yep.
Operators already run all of the normal processes on their end that they need to from a safety perspective. Pilots checking your IDs. There's some dog screeners that we go through. So they actually sniff the bags, go through that whole process, and you get on the flight. and you're on your destination. So on board, once you're on the flight, there's a couple different elements. I'll start with the dog piece first, which is...
Well, how do you get people like to their seats?
So it's different boarding groups.
Okay.
Yeah, so usually depending on how big the aircraft is, how many folks we're flying, it's anywhere from 2 to 3 boarding groups. And again, that's done on a reactive basis. I know one of the things we want to talk about is just like the FBO perception and what they've thought about it. And I've had a couple FBOs actually tell me like it's their favorite part of the day.
Really? Yeah.
Because, they want to come down, pet the dogs, see them. And I think for a lot of FBOs, it's, hey, we might have plenty of dogs come through on every other flight. So they're usually already prepared with water bowls, other things. But we're setting up the FBO with our Bark Air products, so whether that's treats, toys, all of that.
But you also have someone there at the FBO. Like when being at an FBO for 15 years, I've seen dogs kind of run crazy, but having someone...
It's actually 2, So we have our concierge that flies on the aircraft and then what we call ground support. So that's the other thing with the FBO that we had to make very clear early on is like, hey, the additional work your team's looking at is just if you see a dog, just say, hey, are you flying Bark Air, and point them in our direction. Like we've tried to remove all of that extra work for the FBO to make it as seamless as possible for them and understand like, hey, this isn't a normal operation, but also you guys are flying dogs or you have dogs coming through your FBO all the time today. Like this shouldn't be any different. So we try to take a little corner, have our staff there, and really make it as seamless as possible for the experience.
Yeah. So you get everyone, you got your boarding kind of zones. And then you mentioned, for us, I know some different airplanes. I've got airplanes that won't accept animals. I've got some that'll only accept animals in crates. But you were talking about kind of harnesses. Like how does
so there's a harness on each dog, like a typical harness that you'd, and then what we've worked with our operators is actually like a strap-in system. So it's they designed it to the actual base of the seat. It's all certified and using the right material. And basically for takeoff, landing, and turbulence, the dog is strapped in. So they've developed that whole safety process and what that looks like. But
it's probably something that everyone should use when they're traveling.
Yeah, I mean, the operators actually said, it's funny enough, like we've always thought about this and we've never developed it for our retail clients or wholesale clients, and like now they're using it on every flight, which I think is a testament.
Do you guys,
to like,
is this a Bark Air created device that you can resell?
We actually just kind of worked with our operator and said, hey, like this is something that we want to look through, and they had some great safety recommendations. And I think part of that is, hey, they've been in business for a while and they've been flying a lot of dogs, so they understand, hey, this is what we can do. So I can't take credit for that other than, hey, we'll work together as a partner to figure that out. But I think they've instituted across their whole fleet and use it on every flight.
Wow.
And I think, a lot of operators should, right?
It's a great idea. Yeah.
And it's pretty simple. But going back, once you are on the flight, right, we'll take New York to LA, for example. It's about a 5-hour flight. So flight attendant will come around, say, hey, depending on what time we're leaving, usually we leave at 4 p.m. leaving New York. So, hey, we're planning to serve around 6 p.m. your meal. Does that work for you? The other thing with the meal is, right, you're spacing out. So it's not 2 people eating at a time, because then how are you supposed to hold your dog? So we've thought through those aspects as well. So making sure it's kind of staged in terms of like the timing. But then from a dog experience, I think this is where it's great. They do pop cups, so have like the whipped cream. They do bone broth and champagne. I mean, this is where the team's gone above and beyond to make it like as fun of an experience for that dog. There's dog massage pieces of like just making sure these dogs are pampered. And then the other really cool thing is like our concierge and those trained vet techs. They have a whole array of things, whether it's thunder jackets, fans, like everything they need. Should a dog need some additional things, whether that's calming aids, things of that nature, that they can institute and say, okay, I have a what kind
of high anxiety?
High anxiety
like
dog.
My Jack Russell Terrier.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So maybe putting on the thunder jacket, or hey, I have a I'm trying to think of the little pit bull dog, but I'm blanking on the term. That have the breathing problems.
Oh they're not English bulldogs, but they're it'll come to us as we're talking.
But those sites of dogs, they have a fan for. So really have thought through that whole experience And, you know, we've been fortunate enough to operate over 125 flights, and like we've had to institute some of those things, right? We might have had to bring off a fan to cool down a dog, but there's been no incidences. So it's been great. And yeah, the terms of like also plenty of water, also looking at like, hey, do you want treats? All of those things. And then a natural question that will come up is what happens if my dog has to go to the bathroom or if I have to? So the easier one answer is the human, right? Yeah. Our concierge will come, take the dog for you. You go use the lav, easy. If a dog has to, so there's pee pads that we put out in the actual lavatory as well. And then they've developed a system where there's like a scent that they're spraying down that actually induces the dog to kind of like sniff around. I'd say, you know, if the dog really has to go, that usually works. But sometimes it's looking at the dog's temperament and saying like, hey, we might have misread, like, my dog doesn't actually have to go to the bathroom. He was just, you know, shaking or something else. So,
wow. I'm assuming there's the every once in a while accident, like any time you travel. What's the feedback you've been getting from passengers?
Sure. On the accidents or just like
no, just on the experience.
No, experience. I mean, we do surveys right after the flight. Hey, would you rank this on 1 to 5 stars? So almost like a net promoter score. Yeah. I mean, the feedback's been just amazing, right? Yeah. I think part of that is the customers that we're flying and just like the level of attention that we're doing. But it also goes back to like the service of, hey, we're getting your dog from point A to point B safe, pretty affordably. Like hearing about those stories of the other things they've considered or other travel nightmares they've had, I think it really just heightens like the service you guys are providing is amazing, and like dog parents are rejoicing and are very thankful for that. So yeah, we've been very lucky to have like great feedback and always improving, right? There's points of hey, maybe do this or that, and then you've seen those get reflected in our bark experience. So the passenger that might have flown the first time and then flies, you know, 2-3 times later, it's going to be a very similar experience, but you'll probably see slight tweaks of like how we've improved the service every time.
What are you using? You talked about getting that information from passengers about their dogs, and how are you collecting that information? How are you using it? Like, what's the back end system look like?
So we're exploring a couple different systems, but being a niche kind of
it can't be an out of box. system.
Not out of box. So I mean, candidly, a lot of things today are running on like Google Sheets and Excel, but like actively exploring a software that can do everything. So it's a testament to the team and like attention to detail, right? It's a lot of different moving parts. Slack's a big part. And then just constant communication with our operator, right? So advising them on changes to the manifest, all of those things. But I think we've got it, you know, pretty well oiled at this point. There's always more we can do to like take it to the next level. But I think when you talk about like growth plans and continuing to expand routes and everything, like eventually the Google Sheet's going to break, right? Yeah. So it's just a matter of time before we can take that next step. And we've been exploring softwares and have some good conversations going.
What is the experience when you're looking at working with operators? Yeah. Like, what's that experience look like when you're trying to, like, I'm assuming there's operators that just say no way, right?
Sure.
But there's probably plenty of, like, how many hours have you flown this year? Yeah. Like, how many hours do you think you'll fly?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I mean, we'll do close to, we've already done 125 flights. We're on average, like those legs are
5 hours.
5 hours domestically, and then internationally it's 8. I mean, so when we're probably approaching 100 hours a month, if that. And then
when you get to the 12. Over 1,000, that has to be something that operators look at positively, right? And like you said, the fixed scheduled service is good for everybody. Yeah. So when you're looking at operators to work with, you know, what's the list that you're going down that says, you know, assuming safety is number one, but then like as you're going down that
safety
list,
first and foremost. I think the second thing you're looking at is like, are they dog friendly or not, right? If they're not, like, we're not going to change that. The owner doesn't want to do that. Okay, that's fine. Once they are dog friendly, I think it's then educating, right? We've had a lot of people that say, I fly 2 to 3 dogs, but like 9, like that's a lot. And it's then saying, hey, we've done this many flights. Here's kind of our track record. Here's how we are different. We bring on our own concierge. We have our own staff. We go through all of this detailed gathering to make sure the flights go smooth and seamless. And at the end of the day, like, this is our track record, and hopefully it, shows you something. Price is a key point, right? We're never going to gouge someone in terms of the operator relationship. And like, you hear a lot about like a race to the bottom in private aviation. Like, at the end of the day, what we've established is, hey, it's got to work for all parties, right? You have to make money on this transaction in terms of what you're giving us. We have to then be able to market it and still be able to make money as well. So, having that relationship. And then the biggest thing I'd say that we also look for is just like fleet diversity in terms of like multiple aircraft that can back up that aircraft, right? So if an AOG were to happen, do they have another aircraft on the ground? What are their bases? Do they have mechanical infrastructure at those bases, right? So luckily in New York, LA, we're flying into these big markets, so there often is maintenance infrastructure on a pretty quick notice. But
there's a big difference between using some random maintenance tech that's not your home base.
Home base.
Versus a maintenance tech that knows this airplane, knows the ins and outs of it.
They have parts on demand, ready to go. So that's a big piece, right? And, we're pretty set in the aircraft we're flying, so mostly G4s, Global Express as well. And then always depending on the aircraft size and how many people we have, we might up or decrease that aircraft. So it all just depends.
So if you sell, if there's a day that sells 6 seats versus 10 seats, you may move the airplane up or down.
If we sell 10, it's, hey, what's that passenger experience? Do we want to maybe put it on a bigger aircraft? Especially for the longer international routes, we're always looking at doing that. And like ideal configuration, obviously would be all forward facing. There's not many aircraft out there like that. So what we're often looking at is, a mix of captains, chairs. Conference table doesn't really work that well for us. So the couch is another nice aspect, especially for the larger dogs. We have a Great Dane on. We've had the fortune of serving a good amount of those. Like, they love the couch, and they'll take up the whole couch. So it's always working in those numbers and trying to understand, like, okay, how many small dogs, how many big dogs, where are we mapping out? And like, again, constant communication internally of, hey, this flight on the 20th, like, these are the numbers we have. Should we up it, down it? Like, there's always that going on.
Is the majority of the bookings one seat? Or how many are seeing people book more than one seat?
Yeah, it really varies. I mean, we had one individual that booked like 4 seats for himself and his dog because he just wanted, it was extra space. And I think it was like a very well-known like show dog, and he was like, look, this is what I want to do. But majority of the time it's one individual or their family. So usually it's one seat or one space, but it just depends.
The pricing set up like commercial pricing where it's
dynamic
as the seats get less, the pricing goes up?
It's something we're always evaluating. Currently it's flat. It's been flat. That's kind of just based off of where we have been as a business. It's worked for us, but I think there's always something that we're looking at of, do we need to change that? Especially with the European demand coming back, like in certain months it's a little softer. So do you need to get dynamic there? We'll see. Something we're evaluating.
Okay. From a regulation standpoint, when they first started doing this, what were their thoughts on, like, all right, how are we're just gonna 135 charter it, or like when they looked at 380, were they looking at 121? Like, how are they analyzing from a regulation standpoint how to make this work well?
I think the first question was like, hey, I don't own the aircraft, and like I probably don't want to own the aircraft right at this stage. So like, what are my options? That leads you down a path of 135 to 380, and that's the direction they went. In terms of like owning our own certificate, owning our own aircraft, we're a year into this. I think down the line, sure, we're exploring all of those options. But, if I were to give advice to like another niche company that's coming in the space, it's like, start small, right? We started with bi-weekly flights across a couple routes. Like, don't jump into a crazy schedule, and like work your way up, understand your demand. So that's how we kind of eased into the things. I think there's always a question of like, do you lease, do you buy your own aircraft versus more of like a GRP ad hoc charter? And that's been working really well for us. So we're always looking at what those numbers look like. I think the next step is just looking at aircraft configuration as well, and like, are there ways we can also take a look at that aircraft and say, can we put more seats on, figure something out there?
I guess that's the big question of like if moving from chartering where it's like, all right, it's someone else's plane, right? Yep. So I don't have as much choice versus, all right, if I move into airplane ownership, there's a lot of choices.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not just business jets. You could look at, like Aero or JSX, they've got, commercial style airplanes that they're reconfiguring. So I'm assuming that's a consideration. We say, all right, what's the next step?
Yeah.
This, right?
I mean, always a consideration. And I think the numbers just have to make sense for us in terms of like, hey, like on our New York to LA route, are we moving enough passengers where we think we can make that next step, right?
Which would be 30, right?
Yep.
That 30 step.
30 and then hopefully 60.
There's different airplanes that can do that route. And
without having to do a stop.
The regional airliners can't really do that, right?
Yeah.
Have you looked, I'm assuming you have, but have you looked at the New York, Miami, Florida route?
Funny you say that. We actually launched a couple test flights over... not Memorial Day, it was President's Day weekend.
Yep.
And that went, relatively well. We were doing that on 30-seat executive aircraft. 30-seat configured aircraft.
Commercial configured
aircraft. And then again, we're always looking at demand as well. So, hey, do we need to scale that down to like a 16-seater? Do we need to, there's not really much other than going, once you go above 30, you're looking in the 121 space, which we've had a lot of conversations with as well. And, digesting that pricing and saying, okay, if it's this, we need to sell it at this. And then basically, how does that look into our full schedule? So we've had some conversations on the 121 side, but again, that's future looking.
There's not a lot of airplanes for charter outside. I mean, when you go from 12 to like that's like 12 to the 30, right?
Yeah.
And then when you go above 30, it's hard to find airplanes to charter in that space.
Counting on a hand, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and then like when over the last year, I think the guys, was it Miami Air? They went out of business, so it's like that's a tough business to charter those airplanes. Although
Ultimate Jet just went.
Yeah, Ultimate Jet and their Dorniers. I do know the guys that run a small, I think they have 737s. I knew the investor, and he was like, "Hey, we're looking to sell." I think they have two 737s.
Yeah. If you look at the charter space on those, it's already challenging. So I think what we bring to the table is like set demand, and we can hit that. But also, haven't had that many conversations on the 121 side where it's like we want to charter and we have the dogs, and like it's also a different set of regulations.
I was gonna say like how would that change your business going from the 380, 135 to that 121 space? I mean, isn't part of the experience the simpler FBO experience versus the commercial terminal experience?
There's a lot that would go into that, and I think we haven't gotten.
I think people would still. Do you think the main goal is basically not putting your dogs under the airplane? Do you think that's like the number one thing that people really appreciate?
I think so, right? And I think some of that is based on, hey, you have, smaller dogs that in theory could maybe fly commercial in cabin, and they're not. So I think that's certainly a piece. The other thing you've seen is a crackdown a little bit on like service animals and getting those licensed and certified, and like that's a lot harder to do. So I think all of those are factors that are going into it. But always evaluating.
What is the cost for the flights right now?
So New York to LA is $6,000. New York to San Francisco is $6,500. And then our international routes range anywhere from $8,000 to $9,000.
And then from your next routes, we talked about Miami. We're going to launch.
And then the Miami, those range anywhere from $600 to $1,300, depending on.
That's a pretty. Well, you're doing the numbers are a little different with the airplanes too, right?
Exactly.
So little shorter flight time, bigger airplanes.
Yeah, and look, I think that's a very different. If you look at like our segments of business, like it's very different. Shorter stage length. I think you're talking about a more affordable ticket. So always testing that, right? Want to see how we can serve as many dogs as possible on these different routes. And I mean, the route data I go back to, it's copious, and it's from everywhere. It's like.
The WingX data, we had Richard at WingX, and his his data is incredible. But I guess it even goes to like you can start to look at holidays, right?
Yep.
So you've got the holiday peak.
Yeah.
So it's like it's simple to do like weekly or biweekly, but at what point do you start to say, all right, well, over these dates we're gonna increase, and over these dates we're gonna decrease? Like, how do you start to consider those data points?
Yeah, I think that's where you get into more of like hey, this is what our schedule looks like. This is how many flights we have. This is the current demand.
Yeah.
And like we've been at that one step below that where it's, hey, this is our schedule. This is the pricing. It's been working. But once you get above that threshold, to your point, you can get more dynamic, all of that. And it's, again, stuff we've talked about internally. But, we'll see.
You're pretty much building an airline, right?
Yeah.
From the ground up.
Yeah. And taking it, smart, effective steps where it's using the 135, building from there. So I think, we're always on the horizon of what the next step is. And I think there's some fun things in the pipeline.
Outside of routes, what do you think are other services or other things that you guys will start to include for customers?
Yeah, I mean, so what we're already doing today, and I go back to our great team that's doing this, is for our 100th flight, it was New York to Paris. I was there on site, seeing it off. Just overheard, hey, I'm moving to Paris from New York. I'm looking for a groomer, just in conversation. By the time they land, maybe 6 hours later, it's a list of recommendations based on where they're living, with groomers that we like, that we maybe have talked about, and say, hey, can you service this dog? So it's a really personalized approach. Or, hey, I mean, the amount of times I get this from folks in industry, others, is like, hey, I subscribe to BarkBox, and like, you guys made a toy like 10 years ago that my dog like loves, and like, can you send me more of those? So it's those small things that our team is always doing to make that as personalized as possible. Outside of that, so we're doing the charters to get you from point A to point B. I think that's been a good model that we're continuing to grow on. Car service is always a fun one, because it's, hey, Dan, when you land, like, do you want jazz on for your dog? Like, what is your dog like listening to? So there's a lot of fun things you can do with that. Hotel partnerships is another big one. We have a great VP of marketing that is kind of bringing a really fresh approach to all of this of, hey, what are those partnerships we can do? So a lot of fun things. And if you look at our Bark Inc. brand, I mean, we're sold in over, I think, 40,000 stores, Target, all over the, big name stores. And it just goes to show, like, there's a lot of fun ways we can leverage the brand to both of those aspects.
The way I think about it is, like, it's how many more services can you sell to a dog owner, right? And dogs, a lot of them need a lot, right? So they need groomers, they need good veterinarians, they need, especially when, and then around travel, for me, it's like either if I'm traveling with or without, if it's without my dog, all right, well, what am I going to do? Who's going to watch my dog? That concierge service that if I was a member or a client, having that additional concierge service would be really beneficial to any dog owner, right?
Yeah, no, huge. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier when you were asking is in terms of what's needed to fly. So domestically, there's just like vaccination records, right? You need to make sure you're up to date on rabies, others. Internationally, there's more complex steps. So oftentimes you need to have, sometimes in some countries, blood tests done. We try to like always evaluate that when we're looking at new routes. Another big one is banned breeds. So in certain countries, you're not allowed to bring a certain breed in.
Oh, really?
So that's like another way
like
where
a pit bull or something.
So it's like, hey, maybe we don't go to that market because, we fly 10% of these breeds. So always something we're considering, but overall the paperwork process, our team does a great job of taking you through the deadlines, having recommendations, all of that fun stuff.
That's a ton of data that you're probably collecting that you probably need a good system to to say, hey, your dog's rabies shot's coming up here in 2 months, and you've got this flight coming up in a month or 2 months.
Yeah, and I think one thing we're always looking at is like with the current administration, like hopefully the USDA like health like cuts and making sure paperwork gets back on time. All of that is something we've heard there might be some slight delays in. So it's just preparing customers for, hey, maybe expect a delay on this, but like know that we're always monitoring, or if you have questions. So the team's amazing at giving out those recs, whether it's grooming places, dog friendly restaurants, like I mean, we have 600 employees on the barking side. We're headquartered in New York. So when it's like, hey, who has a good recommendation for a dog-friendly bar in New York? There's 10 lists that come together, and then you get to send that off. So it's really fun on that aspect, and I love working with our team to like come with those curated lists.
I wonder if you start doing like dog-specific vacations for people.
Yeah, like packages, right? It's like, hey, you're going to go to...
Here's our Mexico dog vacation or cruise, dog cruise or something like that.
Aircraft's on the ground for like 3 days. You can work through the pricing.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool.
Really cool.
What are some of your like favorite stories you've heard from customers?
Yeah, there's obviously like the photos that get shared of like just the dogs, and our Instagram has a lot of those. And I mean, there's some amazing dogs we've flown. In terms of like favorite stories, I mean, there's a lot. I think one that like hits home because we are recording this in LA is like with the fires. We had a gentleman lost his whole house to the fires, relocated to New York. Like that was a memorable flight, right? Helping him to get from point A to point B with his dog, and like how can we help elevate that for the dog when they land? So it's like sending our Bark Box package so they have a fresh set of toys and things of that nature. But there's been so many great experiences of just hearing those stories of how we were able to get someone from point A to point B, or, hey, you guys saved me like 3 different car rides, flights, whatever it might be, like all the time savings that we're able to offer as well. So yeah, I think, just hearing those customer stories have been really memorable, but also I'd give our Instagram a look. Like there's some fun dogs. We flew a 150-pound Mastiff, like just like great. And they put like the little captain's hat on. I mean, it's fun. So they do a great job with the socials and everything else.
How do you think you're going to manage growth and still have that customer focused and maintain that integrity of the business as you grow? What do you think you need to do?
Yeah, I think the big thing for us is just looking at like the aircraft size, right? Like when we do those New York to Miami flights, we had more concierge on there, right? So making sure we're appropriately staffed. So hey, rather than 1 concierge, there's 2 concierge overseeing that.
10 people in FBO versus 30 is probably a little different too, right?
Yeah. So I mean, as you know, FBO space is sometimes scarce, and hey, can we get our own terminal, things of that nature we're exploring. So, but in terms of going back to that growth question, I mean, looking at how can we efficiently use the aircraft as well? So is there route pairings or certain days that work better for the operator? We tend not to fly on, weekends going into Europe because permit office is closed. You need a certain tail to get in. So all of that stuff is constantly monitoring. And, I'm not going to lie, there'll be learnings along the way that we're like, oh, didn't think about that. And we'll adapt accordingly. So, yeah, I think always looking at like ways to just level up in a smart and efficient way.
What are some of like the more interesting learnings you've had? Yeah. Like running this thing for the first year, like something that happened, you're like, whoa, like didn't even think of that.
There's been so many of like small learnings. Trying to think. Honestly, just like the AOG aspect has been a big one of like understanding all of the permitting process into Europe. So, hey, if we're AOG on a certain day in Europe, it's only a certain tail that can get us out. And like, those were some like, those
are hard conversations to have with people on a Friday and on a Saturday or even a Sunday. And for me, having those just on a charter standpoint is, all right, you're on this airplane and you're flying to this location that requires permits, and we have the permit, but if something happens, there's not going to be a replacement airplane that's going to be able to get a permit at this time. And people are like, well, what do you mean? So, well, here's the permit process. What's that one, bro? It's just the GoPro. Sorry, guys. Okay. And when you look at the permit process, it's like, well, if this were during the week, here's the 48-hour permit process, especially if we're changing tail numbers, because on the permit, it's this airplane, it's this tail. So like that change is really difficult. And I think it comes down to communication, right? As long as you're communicating, here's the restrictions of your flight, I think people can understand a lot better. It was actually the same communication I had with someone. We were booking a flight within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Said, all right, here we were booking this flight within 12 hours. Here's what's quite often going to happen.
Yeah.
You want to go at 9. Yeah. As we go through this booking process, they're going to realize things that they normally would figure out when they had 2 weeks notice and fix. Because it's 12 hours, there's a lot of things they won't be able to fix. Yeah. And we want to go at 9, but something will happen, and we'll have to replace an airplane or a pilot. And something did happen. Yeah. They had a part they thought they were going to fix. It wouldn't fix. They had to move an airplane. It was a 3-hour later departure. Yeah. And the client was like, normally I'd be really upset about this. Yeah. But since you communicated these type of issues happen beforehand, we feel a lot more comfortable about it now. It sucks. We're leaving 3 hours later, but at least I knew ahead of time that these things tend to happen.
100%. And the other thing, going back to your question on like operator selection, it's like we've been very fortunate not to have a lot of mechanicals, and like that's one of the biggest aspects of my job is trying to recover if we need to. So what are those backup plans? And like you better believe before we have a flight going internationally, I'm saying, okay, who are the US based operators that are just there if we need them, just to have that ready to go.
Yeah.
The other big learning, and we haven't done that many flights. We have an upcoming flight into Lisbon, is you can get a landing slot, but parking, right? So you're not able to get parking until like 24 hours before, and securing that. So like, how are you supposed to operate an airline doing that? So some of that is also just looking at, okay, we need to maybe take a step back. Hey, like, is Lisbon the right airport, or do we need to go somewhere else?
Yeah. Can you build like local FBO partners where it's like, all right, how we're operating this many, do I pay in advance for parking? Like, how can I work with
Yeah, I don't know how it works in Lisbon. We have a great handler that's like boots on ground. Yeah. They know exactly what they're doing. But I think some of that's just time of year too, right? Like if you're flying into Lisbon in peak time, it's not going to be as easy as if you wanted to go to Lisbon in December. Like, I don't think it's as big of an issue.
Europe is just different.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't care as much, but like in the US, you can get a GM of an airport on a phone, and he'll open an airport open for you, and he'll send people to help you. Europe's a little different. They've got their attitude towards a little bit different than I think it is in the US.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's harder for them to go above and beyond. Yeah. Because they're just, you're European and life is good. And,
No, we've been fortunate with some of the partners we work with. They have, whether it's in Paris, that have the same location in Madrid. So it's like, hey, we've done these flights for Bark Air. We understand the operators they work with. And it's been really smooth and like making those inroads. But like, you better believe the first 10 flights we did into Paris, like there was a lot of back and forth of learnings and how can we optimize this and what else do you need from us. So all things that like went into starting this.
What advice would you give to any aviation entrepreneurs that are starting a niche or first of its kind of business?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely start like and scale it in a smart way. Like don't jump in and say, oh, I'm going to put up, weekly flights. It's like, no, manage that cash and like continue to grow it. And I think, you'd be surprised at how some of these niche business segments can perform, right? Like we've been able to prove that flying dogs is very in demand and, continuing to grow the business that way. So, I think, there's always new models coming and going, and I'm sure you've seen a bunch over the years, right?
I mean, someone that's building a specific market model, starting with Cabo, and we're about to launch another route to Aspen. It's like, I completely understand that. Sure. I think the focus makes a lot of sense. When you're trying to be everything to everybody, it's hard. Yeah. When you're trying to do one specific thing, I think it allows you to stay focused, and you just provide. You're just like, all right, how do I do more? How do I be better for this one specific focus of the market? Definitely. And I think it provides a lot of value to customers.
Yeah. And I mean, this goes without saying, but like listening to your customers, right? Yeah. Like the amount of conversations we've had to better understand like what you're looking for, how we can serve you, what does that mean to our business? You're never going to leave that and be like, oh, like that was such a bad decision to listen to our customer and like actually do some of the feedback that they wanted. Yeah. That makes sense, right? Like we want to always be optimizing for that feedback? How can we incorporate that in if it is a smart, thoughtful decision for our business, and like, you know, raise that service level, that experience, all of that stuff, right? Obviously we get the, hey, I need you to fly me from, or can you start a route from, Iowa to here? And it's like, I'd love to. Yeah. It's just
you're the only one that,
there's just not as much demand there. So it's like, we are continuously monitoring it, and we'll continue to look at that. But right now that's just not in our destination shortlist.
Would you look at smaller airplanes? The thing is, it's and what we found in aircraft management is this. When you're looking at, the question was, would you go with a smaller airplane for a shorter route? Like, would you do a New York to Nantucket route on a King Air?
Sure.
And what we've always found is it's quite often to do a King Air flight and a Gulfstream flight, it's almost the same amount of work.
Yeah.
But
I've run the King Air flights to Nantucket. That was 7 years ago. But I think the other thing we're fortunate with our route selection is, like, you look at New York to Nantucket, that's that seasonal, hey, are you going to get the other side of the plane filled? Or do you need to have that first leg's pricing cover your basically whole leg? Where we're lucky with the route pairings where, that's another consideration. Are there people on both sides that want to go to the destinations? Date agnostic, right? Whether it's a Monday, Tuesday, whatever it might be, versus I'm only going to Nantucket on a Friday and I'm only returning on a Sunday. Sure, if I want to go on a Friday or on a Sunday, I can get a lower price ticket, but that's probably 90% of people want to go peak to peak. So, it's still the same amount of work, right?
Yeah.
I think, something we're always looking at there is like that experience, right? We've done the Pilatus and Mustang flights for folks that are maybe two people trying to connect on one of our planes, but like, we also need to recognize, like, the plane that we're using has to have enough space if we were to do more of that, like, by the space 380 model on like a larger scale.
Yeah. With the 380 model, they have a restriction of the 5 round trips per week, correct?
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, it's actually like certain routes. Yeah. So you can't run New York to LA.
Airport to airport. Yeah.
Correct. And we're thankfully, thankfully we're growing, but we're not.
We haven't hit that threshold.
We haven't hit that threshold. And when you do, you just go to split kind of different operators. So there's ways to manage that. I think like commuter authority is another pathway to take. So I know a couple operators have done that, but it's on our roadmap. It's not something we need to.
That's like the guys at Contour or the guys here at Advanced Air. They do the commuter authority stuff. If you had one dream route that you would want to launch outside of financially, what would be like your one dream route to launch?
That's a great question. I studied abroad in Australia, so I'd love to do somewhere in Australia. But no, there's actually a company we've worked with, Sky Pets. Joanna, she's great, but they do. I don't know if they originate in Sydney, but somewhere in Australia, and they'll go up to Singapore, go over to London. So she does like 3 stops. It's actually on a A319 configured. So that's pretty cool. And she's the owner and kind of concierge on that. So it's really cool to see her growth. But there's so many routes we could serve. We hear a lot of like Southeast Asia as well.
Interesting.
Hawaii's a huge.
I was thinking Hawaii.
Huge, but it's like there's just some quarantine rules that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
So certainly can look at that. I know Kaiser's does. We call it the pineapple run or something. I forget what they call it. Something like that. But they run that out of Oakland. I know they do a very good job on that. So the
Kona shuttle.
Kona shuttle, that's what it is. Yeah.
Maybe they should probably run. That's
someone
a good
maybe.
That'd be good. The pineapple shuttle. Yeah. Well, one last question. I thought of this too. Is do you work with like travel agents or if other people or maybe charter brokers want to book clients on the airplane? Do you work with them? What's that like?
We were just at S&D, and the amount of people that, one, we're learning about our business is great, but two, are like, I have so many people that fall into that like perfect threshold. Like they don't own the aircraft. They're not going to use a jet card for maybe this specific travel case. Like I'd love to send them your way. So always working to set up like more formal things there on that partnership side. Definitely looking at the travel agents as well. I think the big thing there is like going back to your point, as you get bigger aircraft, you look at OTAs, can you get on Google Flights, all of these things. Something that's, again, not today, but in the future. And I think that's where the travel agent piece really kind of can gel in well with the business. But yeah, always getting referrals today. And I think, you know, happy to talk through that and set something up more formally if folks do have those questions. But yeah, always welcome it. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, we're serving these select routes. So it's not like, you know, there's a huge threat to your business. It's, hey, you know, their kids want to go on the route and that makes a lot of sense for them.
Here's a route, here are the dates, you know. If people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do it?
Should I list my email or what's best? So it's rrudolph@barkbox.com. We have our social media. If you email the inbound flow to like want to book a flight, there's our website as well, which I can provide. So all of that is a great way to get in touch. And
is it barkair.com?
It's let me pull up. I don't want to misquote exactly what it is because I think we use like a
.co or something.
Yeah, it is air.bark.co.
Air.bark.co.
Yeah, and that's where you can book the
bark.co is a pretty good URL.
Yeah,
that's.
I mean, that was when I was originally reaching out to the founder to get the consulting going. I was like, I love the name.
Yeah,
like, it's so smart with the branding and everything else. It's just like, and they do a great job on all their social media with like the branding and
brands. Kind of building businesses off of brands has really become a great strategy.
And look, I mean, who's to say that like if we didn't have that larger brand behind us, like would the business be the same today? I think probably not, right? It would have been a lot different. So we're very lucky to have that as we continue to grow and scale the business.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thanks, man.
Dan, really appreciate the time.
Yeah,
thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ironbird Podcast with Ryan Rudolph from Bark Air. If you enjoyed this show, make sure to subscribe and share with an aviation enthusiast. For more insights into private jet ownership, charter trends, operational strategies, you can visit us anytime at flyironbird.com. And special thanks to our two sponsors, Video Valet and Charter Flight Support. Thanks again.